Welcome to the Inherent Self podcast. I am your host, Taylor Draper, with my co-host, Mike Regennitter, and Jonathan Liebert. Guys, why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you and what this podcast is all about for you?
Absolutely. So I'm Mike Regennitter. I'm an entrepreneur in town, Colorado Springs. I've been here since 1999. Raised our kids here, but I own Regco Media, which is a media company and a marketing company. But one of the primary, I think, staples you'll see in town that I am part of is Colorado Springs Magazine. So that's our product, and we love that product because we get to elevate our community to a different level. So, and then when it comes to mental health is very personal for me. And I think when it comes to men specifically, just mental health in general, but when it comes to men, it's my sweet spot. And I think there's so much going on there. This world that I think this podcast and our conversations and what we're doing to address that through Inherent Self is going to be very vital to our not only our community but even nationwide. So that's me.
Yeah, thanks, Mike and Taylor and Jonathan Liebert. I am a social entrepreneur, so I've been doing that work for many, many years, and it's all about purpose and profit for me, which is why I'm involved in Inherent, which is a social enterprise. I'm a professor here at the local university. I'm also a small business advocate and do a lot of things about just kind of trust and making sure businesses are doing things the right way. I'm also doing a lot of stuff with AI education right now, so a ton of stuff with that as well. But it's all about trust, it's all about ethics, and right now, we are in the middle of a mental health crisis. And so that's why I'm grateful for this conversation and for this show today and moving forward, because we're talking about the mental health crisis specifically, but more specific, it's how it is negatively impacting men. And so that's the topic of the conversations for this podcast. And I think it's more important than ever, not just for us as men and human beings, but because of what's happening out there in communities across the United States. And in another life, I tell people I was a mental health professional. So did therapy work. I worked in a large behavioral healthcare organization here in this community for about 15 years. And it's definitely time that we have these conversations that are more specific, strategic, and really make sure we're providing some opportunities for men to connect with each other and get better, get well.
Yeah, I would just add to that it's authentic and real. One of the things that blows my mind sometimes is that, even today it happened. I had a conversation with somebody that we are in a crisis, and just in general, mental health crisis all around. Some segments are doing better than others, but when we look at the men specifically, we're as men passing and dying by suicide 4 times the rate as women. And this is not a competition. Let me be very clear.
It's the wrong type, right? It's the wrong competition.
It's not a competition. It's not here to measure up, but it just tells you that we still have a lot of work to do in this area.
Agree.
Awesome. Well, I'm so happy to have you guys here and to start this podcast with you all. For those of you who don't know, this podcast is specifically for men's mental health with our nonprofit Inherent Self. So Inherent Self is a lifestyle movement. Thank you both so much for being here. On this podcast, we're going to be tackling issues like isolation. We're going to be tackling issues like depression, friendship, fatherhood, entrepreneurship, all of these amazing things. And we're doing this through our nonprofit Inherent Self, which is a lifestyle movement for men's mental wellness. Just as Mike said, men are 4 times more likely to die by suicide than women. 1 man dies by suicide 1 minute of every day across the globe. And it's not okay. So we wanted to just open up a platform for guys and really anyone to kind of just listen in as we talk about these deep issues. And today we're talking about, on episode 1, why it's so hard for men to talk about their mental health. And before I hand it over to you guys, I'd like to hear from you what mental health means for you.
Go ahead.
There you go.
Yeah, you go.
Dr. Liebert?
Dr. Liebert.
I mean, it's important, right? Because I think in order to describe, an issue or a solution, you got to be able to describe like what it is and what it means. And I think for me, mental health, it is a combination of things, but it is more about this balanced approach to health and well-being. And, here in the United States, like there's definitely, we were just talking about this, right? From a standpoint of physical health, well, that's accepted. We understand how this works. You're going to go get your physical every single year, but mental health, we're not going to talk about that. And as men, like feelings, I don't have any feelings, which is all BS, right? And that's what's part of the issue that's hurting men. And so for me, mental health is really about making sure that you're having the full conversation about it. So physical health is important, but your mental health is also important. If it's up to me, everybody will be able to go in for, a mental health checkup, just like you go in for your physical annual, review, you get that for the mental health part, but it's about taking care of yourself. It's about making sure that you're doing the work, but it's also about the relationships and the connectivity. So mental health to me is like, it's just this larger kind of piece of information. And talked about last time, putting the men in mental health too, like this applies to men. It's already in there. But if we don't talk about it, if we don't understand it, if we don't accept it, if we don't take care of ourselves, if we don't ask for help, that's a hard one for folks, right? Because we've all been trained not to ask for help, be an island, suck it up, be a man, all that nonsense too. It's like, we are allowed to feel, we're allowed to ask for help. We're allowed to, especially with, families and loved ones, show the softer side to us. But to me, it's a better balance of that. It's a better understanding of, what does it mean to be a man? And I know we're going to talk about that too, but yeah, the mental health piece for me is it's a broader topic that kind of goes with all these pieces together: the health, the physical health, the mental health, the wellness, spirituality, all those different types of things kind of coming together, and you really being honest with yourself about this is working for me or this is not working for me, and how am I going to get better? Oh no, by the way, I can't do it by myself. I need a community of people around me.
Yep. Yeah, I expand on that too a little bit. Where you look at the society we're in today, right? And you look at the media, and you look at the world we're living in, and mental health is, if you watch the news, which okay, I'm guilty of doing that sometimes. But you watch the news, and mental health is actually put into a negative context, right? You look at what we're just going through right now, and let's timestamp this episode, because we have some things going on, and we're all declaring that it's a mental health issue that we're ignoring, which I do agree.
Yeah.
However, it's also been put into a bad light. So as men, we see that, hey, I don't want to be part of that. That's not me, and all that stuff. And it's also shown as a weakness. So for me, for mental health, what it means is it's really getting connected with yourself, right? You talked about feelings and all that, and I would challenge that. Dude, man, we don't know feelings actually. What is it? I had a friend share with me, and I'm writing a book. It's called Unspoken, which is really about men. And, we all think the same things, but we're not going to share it, this is going to break that. But, I was sharing with a friend, in the sense that I get a hug from a buddy.
Oh, you told me the story. This is a good story.
This is the friend.
Yeah.
Right. And so I got a hug from a buddy. It was about 5 years ago. And he's, he gave me a really good man hug. He's like, but dude, it's like, whoa, what is this? And then he said, I love you, man. You're a great guy. And I was like, whoa, hang on, right? But my example of that is not to be fearful of it. It's just to say, dude, this is an opportunity for us to break down those barriers and accept that hug, because that hug alone, without saying a word, is powerful.
Yep.
But then hearing those other words just kind of puts a cherry on the top. And as men, we're not conditioned to do that. So what does that mean for us? So for me, mental health is defined as, I think, Taylor, you're going to probably end on this, but it's everything that we deal with, but it's really being in touch with yourself and your emotions. And we just, as guys, we don't know what that means.
Yep.
Yeah, that's really good. Thanks for sharing. The what mental health means to me is like something that all of us as human beings go through. And it's not a man or woman thing. So like, why does it have this negative connotation, Like, I'm really curious on your thoughts about that. But for me, it's just like, we have these emotions, we're supposed to feel them. Why is it for men specifically that we're supposed to push some down and not others, when it's all emotions are equal, right? Like, anger is the same as joy. Joy is the same as sadness. Like, it's a cycle that we all go through, just like most things in the world. So why is it that it's okay for some emotions to be shown by men and not others?
I like to tackle that right away too. Is I think for men to be able to tackle some emotions and not others is not really about our choice at the time. Again, part of my book I write about, and I'm trying not to be matrix here, but we are programmed. What I mean by that is we're raised a certain way to be able to think a certain way. And part of that is going to be inherent from the day we're born, but most of that's going to be inherent from our experiences, right? I played high school football. I'm big into sports and all that. And with sports, it was like when I grew up, baby boomers were the leaders of our community. They're my parents. And it was all about not showing weakness. So that was drilled into me. And in some episode, I love to share more my story with my dad. I love my dad to death, and I've been able to get past that. But even from his raising, think of that. He's a baby boy, right? So think about how he was raised. And there's more to that story. But I say we're programmed a certain way to be able to react into our circumstances. And so not even knowing what feelings are, well, dude, we weren't even allowed to have feelings, right? On a football field, on a basketball field, it was all about performance. And dude, guys are built for performance. That's one of our primary things besides protection and providing and defending. Performance is a big deal for us. And so if we're not measuring up to that, it's not about how we feel, it's about how we get there, no matter what. So that means we're putting on masks. So when it comes to me, when it looks at the negative part of that, it's about, our here upbringing. We have the opportunity right now as men in our generation to change that and be part of that conversation, because I think the younger generation have it right. I think they're still trying to find their footing, but they have the right to have the conversation. They're pushing this. And we're just starting to ride their coattails to say, okay, you're right. Let's start having these conversations. So it's all programmed. From the day we're born to how we're raised to how we decide to wake up one day and say, enough's enough. I got to figure out what I'm built of.
And I think, yeah, and I agree with everything. I think some of it, to answer the question, too, comes back. If you go back, and it's not that far. I mean, even the historical part of it, you look at the delineation of gender roles in an agricultural, mindset. We're talking a couple hundred years here. So when now we're all in cities and it's more urban. There's more surplus of things. There's more money. There's more food. There's more whatever. But when everybody was on a farm, and again, that's every culture goes through this. You do have those delineation of roles, and so I do think we're still living in the past. I mean, you just look at like the American school system. The whole we have summer break because that's based on the farmer's schedule of harvest. I mean, we've got all this stuff kind of built in, so you got to look back just a little bit in some cases to see.
Good book on that,
right? There's some interesting studies on this of how we've built this thing around it. But I think the roles come back from an older, perspective of when society worked and how it worked. I also think that when you look at the study of psychology as a science, like that's relatively new. It's been around for a while, but the doctors and the medical profession have kind of seen it as more hokey and not real science. And that's because we didn't have the technology to look into the brain. So we probably learned more about the human brain in the last 10 years than we have in the last 100. But for physical health, we've been able to kind of dissect the body and look at the skeleton, muscular structure, and the science of that. We've learned a lot and progressed. Only recently, from that standpoint, can we unlock some of the secrets of the brain. And we still got a long way to go. So I think that's the other piece here where, well, that's hokey, that's not science, that's quackery, and therefore there's a stigma. And and again, here's the other thing. People fear what they don't understand.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. When you have a physical issue, if I broke my arm, I got a cast on. Oh, you broke your arm. I see that. I understand it. Oh, this person has a mental health issue. Oh, well, that means they're schizophrenic, they're bipolar, they're scary, because we see all the stories in the media. So again, it's an invisible thing. Mm-hmm. If you can't wrap your mind around something because it's invisible, it's hard to understand it. If, somebody's in a wheelchair, I get that. Somebody's blind, I get that. You've got depression, you must be weak.
Yep.
You've got schizophrenia, you're crazy. And there's all this stuff. So I do think that the Hollywood side has not helped. I think when people can commit some crimes, you kind of reference that there are some mental health issues, but to kind of blatantly say everybody's got it, that's also a problem. Yep. So I think stigma is an issue. I think the history, you can explain how that is. But what I do love about the younger generation, we were handed this methodology from previous generations. What I love that's happening right now, specifically with the millennials and the Gen Z, is they've kind of said, well, hold on a second. Time out. Like, why are we going to do this again? Why are we going to create this cycle all over? That doesn't make sense. Mm-hmm. And so I think that's a healthy question to ask, because, you do have younger people that are saying, I do need help. I want it. And it's empowering other people. I think, I'm a Gen Xer, raised by a boomer, right? It's like, oh man, thank goodness we're finally talking about this.
We're Gen Xers. Everybody's an asshole, so forgive me. But
right, we were raised on our own. We drank from the hose outside, right? We're the latchkey kids.
Had the banana seat bikes, and we're jumping like these big. Yeah, right.
That's
we're
right.
Crazy,
That's right.
And survived, but
we did.
Yeah. No, I think you bring up some very valid points with that too, and I think it is a generational thing for sure, but. I think to try to answer some of your questions that, it is driven by society, and we're dealing with so much craziness right now. And I'm not going to speak to some of those terminologies just because I don't want to get into the political science of it, but it is affecting how we try to move forward. When you look at Gen Xers, I look at some of those things, I'm like, well, you're crazy, but vice versa. Right. So how do we build this bridge to really be able to have this conversation? Right. And for men to really take a step back and just dive into it for real, for themselves.
Yeah. So we've established like the generational issues and even some societal ones still. But why, like, it's still so prevalent in men right now to not have these conversations. We see like some emerging generations like millennials and Gen Zs and Gen Alpha, I think, is the next one, that are much more open to these, because it's like it's like putting water through a filter is how I kind of look at it. It's like we have this poisoned well over here. Now we got this big ass Brita filter and all these things, all this poison is getting reduced. It's not gone yet, but the water's still a little cloudy, but it's heading that way, which I think is like pretty hopeful. But for a guy that's going through something and maybe recognizing it, or maybe open to the concept that, oh, this is because of my mental health. Like, I'm feeling these things. I'm feeling depressed. I'm feeling anxious, which are things, just to be clear, all of us feel on a daily basis. It just depends on the depth of how much you're feeling that, right? But if someone's more open to that concept of this is a mental health issue, just like if they pulled a muscle at the gym, this is, I pulled my ankle or I sprained my ankle or whatever like that. Like that's the direction that Jonathan, you're saying is where you'd like to see things move towards, where it's like, but again, I think, and we've talked about this before, but for me personally, that starts with recognizing what's happening in my body. Like if I'm in a tough meeting or in a spot that's really stressful and I feel like my chest tightened up, for me, it's like, okay, I know that that's anxiety. Mm-hmm. Or like I just have zero energy when I wake up. It's like, okay, that's depression. And then, we'll talk about this in a little bit, but, having some tools to start identifying those things and naming them first, I think is really important. But for the average guy that this is a new concept for, like, what would you say to them?
Well, I mean, for the average guy, it depends, because you got 5 generations that were dealing with.
These are blue collar to doctors, to,
correct?
White collar.
Yeah, and we've got hundreds of years of socialization that have told us to act a certain way, and what you just described too. It's like, well, here's what I'm doing for me. For the right person, or even the right generation, I can relate and understand. For another generation, you can't say that. Well, you could, but then they're going to judge you, and they're going to have a negative reaction to that. So I think that's the part too, where it is not safe for everybody and for every guy to kind of talk about those things. And again, that's what I think inherent self are doing. Yep. That is good, is that we're promoting a way to connect, a brotherhood of men of all generations. That's a safe place to connect, ask questions, get help, get tools, get whatever you need.
Not
because
judgmental.
On your own, you can kind of figure it out, but you got to be careful. But I think that's the piece where we are trying to kind of turn the tide and to provide much more of a safe place with much more people who have a bunch of different backgrounds and perspectives and everything else. And again, through sheer numbers, we will get there. But I mean, let's be honest. So we're trying to turn the tide on something that's massive. It's been around there for years. Oh, and by the way, good and bad, thanks Hollywood, who have personified, deified, and villainized all of it. So we got to work against that too. Social media as well.
Yeah. Well, so I want to take a step back a little bit too. And you talked about this too. You talked a little bit about science, right? And so I do want to dive into this a little bit too when it comes to the male brain, right? And the female brain. When it comes to the male brain, we are designed a certain way. However you want to define it, that's up to you. But we are built, our brains are built a certain way, and it started from infancy. And then when we get to teenagers, I mean, our teenagers are producing almost 2 gallons of testosterone. So they can't even think straight, right? So you mix all of this historical things and what I was talking about being programmed into those things where young men, they really can't think straight. And I don't want to simplify it because even the author in the book I wrote about this, and I'm writing a book about, the men's brain. It's like, well, I'll be short. Actually, our brain is very complicated, right? But it's also based on all the chemicals. So how do we deal with that? You referenced that earlier too. We live in a society today where in the back, we are around our fathers. We are around our grandparents because we had to work with them in the field. Today's society, we don't get that opportunity. Call it post, industrial revolution, call what you want. But the father was removed from the house. And I do think that's an important part of raising young men. I don't think it's the end all, but I think it's a very important part. But our brains are not built that way. The way we get over that is through generational and education, and also being radically open-minded to the ideas of how we have to move forward. We have to get in tune with ourselves. We have no choice.
Yeah, we have no choice.
We have no choice. And I think we're failing our men. We're failing each other by trying to box us into the history of the way our heritage and our growing up and our generations have become men. You had to survive. Today is much different. We have to survive in such a different way. And it's not so much about economics or having food on our table. It's more about how do I survive this situation? So, going back to what you said, I think there's a lot of that science too, but I also think there's a lot more that we're dealing with that it comes down to the guy just waking up someday. I want to get in touch with myself to figure out who I am. How do I react to my chest tightening up? And what does that mean so I can respond in a much better way?
And how would you encourage somebody to start that journey?
I mean, one, you got to do the work. Like, let's be honest. Like, this is definitely it's a lifelong journey. I think for guys that think that they'll arrive or whatever, that it's a forever kind of thing. But to start the journey, I really do think it's important because it is, first of all, it's a conscious decision. The conscious decision is going to be, I'm hurting, I need help, I need something else, or I'm missing something, or this is what I hear because I mentor a lot of young men. It's like, oh, something's off, something doesn't make sense, or I disagree with what I've been taught and told from a societal perspective. And so that's the thing where, okay, you're aware, but what are you going to do about it? And then you got to make sure you're aware of those resources. So I think it's understanding and admitting that you got some work to do, knowing that the work's going to take some time, making the conscious decision to make yourself better, but then having a plan. And that also, means that there's a bunch of great resources in this town, that there are good organizations and there are good people that care. And there's also a lot of men, in this city too, and we're trying to build this up even more, that are going to be able to connect you to come to the fold or go to this event or have this conversation. I think there's a lot of good resources to read about, podcasts to watch, YouTube videos as well. So educate yourself, understand who you are, strengths and weaknesses too. But you got to do the work. But I think that the way to start is to just kind of start digging in and learning about it. I think we've talked about in here before of like understanding if I have a feeling, well, what is that feeling? Most guys are like, I feel weird. Okay, define weird. Well, I don't know. And
give me a hug. I don't like it.
Yeah, I'm not getting a hug. But Taylor, you described it like, well, I got this tightness in my chest, or I feel this in the base of my spine, or whatever. You know what that means. I think that's where guys can start too. Of like, let me kind of dig into this. Like, I feel weird when this happens. Well, why? And so I think being inquisitive and understanding it, you got to put a name to some of these physical manifestations that come through the brain. It's connected. We've done a really good job in our society of separating the head from the body. And it's like, let's bring that back together. Whole person wellness. This is a thing. And it's a good thing. But you got to start with education, asking questions, connecting to people that
being
kind of
inquisitive.
Yeah. And there's a lot of things, but I would say ultimately, like, just talk to somebody, ask for some advice.
Well, that's what I was going to go on. I'm going to steal your thunder. Is that okay?
Yeah, go for it.
It's just to start.
Not the first time.
Yeah, right.
Won't be the last, huh?
Won't be the last. It's just to start. But it comes back to what Jonathan was saying. You have to make that conscious decision. You have to be aware of it. And I think for guys, that's just hard for us. Just to be aware of it is tough. But then make that decision to say, I'm going to make a change. And so it's just to start. That's your thunder.
I think that like community should probably be put first, maybe even before research, in my opinion. That's not a doctor. Because I think
tell me more. What do you mean by define community?
Yeah, so just to expand on that a little bit, I think that oftentimes the safest place to go first is like a friend to start talking about this thing and opening up to it. Just be like, I'm like not feeling the best today, or like maybe even something more serious. Like I'm like don't know if I can continue if things don't get better, kind of thing. But just getting that energy out of your own body to somebody else that you trust, I think is a really soft first step. And then, maybe you do feel, more safe to research things first, and just depends on the guy. I think like most people, for me, it's like just bouncing, just getting it off of my chest, like calling up a friend and being like, things are bad today, and I don't expect you to fix it, but I need to get it out,
Well, I think you bring up, other important topics about that too. And that's just being aware of it. But it's also just being in tune with yourself with all that too. And so when it comes to community, it's 100%. But that comes to courage. You talk about this. I mean, this is one of your big things. And it comes to courage. And you just have to have the courage to be able to do that. And when you're in a situation, guys, I get it. I've been there. When you're in a situation and you just feel like it's hopeless, that courage is nowhere to be found. I mean, it's way, way over there.
Yep.
But to your point, Taylor, it's as simple as, I'll give you an example. I was with a really good friend. We're having lunch, and he's asking how I was doing. And instead of the surface level, hey, it's a great weather today, I'm doing great. I just said, I'm off sync. My rhythm's off. I'm not feeling, normal. That's it. And this person now has been texting me every Friday or Saturday, say, hey, how you doing, man? You holding up? You doing well? And it's just that alone. And I have been doing well, but just that alone of another a friend, a man friend, to say, dude, you doing okay? I'm just checking on you. Holding, kind of call it accountability, call it what you want. But it's actually just caring. But that courage to say that to this person who is educated in a certain field and, should have a very high status is human. And it comes down to that very thing. So when it comes to, I think one of your things, Taylor, which is huge, is it just comes down to courage just to share just one sentence. You don't have to put all your garbage out there on the table. It's just to say that one sentence.
Well, I think men aren't going to be able to say much more than that if they're not in tune. That's why I say, you know thyself is important. You got to do a little bit of some research and stuff too, because for a lot of guys, they're not going to go to anybody because that's not what we're taught. But they're also going to, okay, if I can't describe this, how am I going to ask for? I don't know what I'm asking. I feel weird. Okay, and as men, we're taught to like stuff it. like shove that down.
Oh, 100%. Put it down
Put
so
it down.
it can just boil up.
Yeah. And so I think for a lot of guys too, it's like, well, I understand. Well, what is this? Because we're taught and we're told, well, yeah, that's going to happen. That's normal. But you just stuff it down there and then you'll be fine. And then we're not. And then the questions are like, hey, I need some help. I need whatever. But I think for guys that don't know what they're asking for, that don't know what help, and again, I think for a lot of guys too, like what you just described too, Taylor, that's a higher functioning skill of just, hey, I'm having this off day and describing it. You are in the 10th percentile.
Mm-hmm.
Most guys can't do that because we're not taught to do that. We're not taught to think what the feelings are. We're not taught how to ask for help. Matter of fact, it's not encouraged.
No.
So kudos to you for being able to do that and knowing who your people are. I think for a lot of the guys, it's like, well, I'm my own island and I'm my own person and I got this. And maybe I'll talk to my significant other, but even then it's only a little. Yeah, it's like, just stop. But find your people, find your connections, but also you do have to understand a little bit about like, well, what is this and what's going on? And I would also say this, like we can also get into the rhythm of only talking about the negative things. And as humans, we're really, really good at talking the bad stuff. We also need to celebrate the successes. We do a poor job as men too, because it's expected. You better perform. And if you do, that was good. You're at 0.
Yeah.
No, I'm at like 10 or 3. No, you're 0. No, so we got to celebrate the success and be able to describe, well, I'm at -3 today.
Yeah.
And I don't know why. Sometimes it'll be like, I know exactly why. But for somebody to come to me and say, I don't need you to do anything. I just need you to listen. That's a highly evolved trait of people, which not everybody kind of has. And I think it's important that, you're able to describe what that is. And it's like, yeah, we want people to get there. They're listening. It's like, but yeah, you got to start with a little bit of a know thyself.
Yeah.
Because people are different. Some things are going to bother them. Some things won't. But, how can we collectively, provide that to people too that are seeking some answers?
Yeah, get over that masculinity, the old school masculinity.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a whole podcast itself.
Yeah.
But masculinity to me is being able to get in touch with who you are, so you can get those feelings. So, dude, thanks for being masculine.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's interesting because I don't necessarily view it as like a highly evolved skill at all. Whether that's true or not is neither here nor there. But for me, it's just like as we're talking about this, I really hope it's giving like any listener or one guy even that listens to this, just be like, man, you know what? Even if I don't know what's going on, I'm going to just try to talk to somebody about it. Even if it's using all the wrong words or whatever, like that part doesn't matter. It matters that you're just trying these things. So like, if you're feeling off and you don't know why, like, which is a lot of times, then yeah, like calling somebody up, I think is a great first step.
Well, I would encourage too, because I'm married. I got a great wife. She's very supportive. But there's just some things that my wife will never be able to understand.
Yeah,
never. So I would encourage to what you're saying too is that you got to get in touch with another guy.
Yeah.
If you're, and a woman, if you're dealing with something too, I mean, don't go to your husband or your significant other or your partner, whatever that is, you solve that problem.
Yeah. Because
they're not going to be able to relate.
Right.
So it's important to make sure you do get that. And forgive me, I don't want to cross any boundaries here, but gender related in the sense of connect with men and women, connect with women to be able to understand the relationalize that.
And context is key, but this is also the perfect moment. You guys knew this was coming for my AI PSA, right? This is your public service announcement, y'all. Like, here's the deal. Because let's be honest. Yes, a guy should call. A guy should ask for help. A guy should come to some of our stuff and get stuff. But let's be honest. What are guys going to do? They're going to go to Chat GPT and they're going to go to the internet.
I did it about 2 months ago.
I'm just being honest. So here's the deal. Harvard did a study at the beginning of the year, and that's one of the number one things that people in general are using. They're using AI as a therapist, and so I'm telling people this is the PSA part. Don't do that, please. Talk to a human.
AI's got a lot of great stuff. Right?
Got great stuff, but in the sense of using it for therapy, maybe doing some research, that's fine. But to use it as your therapist, that's not good. And that's what you're saying is like talk to somebody, reach out, ask for help, get plugged in, get some resources. There's a lot of great resources in this town and other places where you can get that. use AI, to maybe do a little bit of education, but to use it as your actual therapist, that's dangerous. So I just want to throw that out there. Like, we got to be careful about how that works. And guys, yes, I know you're going to want to do that and have some conversations, but there's a limit. Like, be safe, be smart.
Yeah. Well, this has been great. I think on the next one, you had a really great idea for a episode, Jonathan. So do you want to lead us into that?
Yeah, I think, again, it kind of goes back to the comment I made earlier, like, know thyself, right? So in order to answer some of these other questions about, what mental health is and why is this important and all the stuff we've been talking about, like, we as men, this has helped me a lot, is I had to understand my purpose first. I understand why am I here? What am I supposed to be doing? What's my higher purpose? And then it's like, oh, okay, well, if I'm going to do that, I need these skills over here. I can do this and that, but I don't have these, but Taylor's got them. Mike's got them. Can we talk? Can we hang out? So it could be another conversation about, getting some skills or some knowledge that then leads into another conversation, a deeper conversation about mental health.
Yeah, that's really great.
Love it.
So we've talked about what mental health is for men, a few different ways to get started on maybe talking about it, getting involved in community or inherent self events. We've talked a little bit about generational issues from that and societal issues and what that could possibly be as a roadblock for a lot of guys to overcome for just talking about mental health and accepting that everyone alive has mental health issues. Doesn't matter who you are.
Yeah.
It's not humans. Mental health is not
Every
a bad
day,
word.
Part of the
Every
human
day.
condition.
Until you grow up, if you think you're going to avoid it, you're wrong.
Yeah. Thank you for normalizing that.
Yeah,
Like, this is
thank
part of being
It's
human.
not a bad word.
You're not alone. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah.
way to frame that. That's perfect.
Well, really appreciate you guys. Please check out inherentself.org for any Inherent Self events. Subscribe to this podcast, share it. Anything else?
I would say too, if you have any topics that you would love to hear about, or if you just want to reach out, there's a couple of ways, do it through this channel, but also, come to an Inherent Self event. Connect with other dudes. You don't have to show up and say a lot of stuff. Just show up.
Yeah, that's the first step. Do something, I think, is the first piece.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But we're all here. We're all here. We want to hear what's important to you guys.
And there's a lot of us. There's more growing. This is growing. So that's what's cool.
It's a growing
Thanks
movement.
for leading this whole charge, Taylor.
I don't lead. I just ask questions. Just ask and sit back. Anyways, appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for listening. We're doing 2 podcasts a month, so make sure you subscribe and follow along with these conversations. If you are feeling something, please reach out to somebody, your significant other, a friend, whoever it might be. And if you're not alone in whatever you're going through.
Yeah, and if you're in crisis, obviously reach out to the hotlines.
Yeah, thank you.